be able to criticize themselves and more. The NPC meme leans right, with right-wingers often saying left-wingers, quote, support the current thing. This is since the left literally has no grounding in reality. Frankfurt School Thought, which the modern left literally and unironically is based off, says reality doesn't exist and the powerful make reality. This means that the left is not accountable to anything in the real world, thus it's only accountable to its popularity inside the organization. This has created comical results, such as when the Trump administration was working on the COVID vaccine, the left said they'd never use it. When that very same vaccine showed up, when the left was in power, they made mandates forcing people to take it. For the Mueller investigation against Trump, the left's view on Mueller fluctuated around 4 different times, between loving and hating him, depending on how it related to their self-interest. There are drag queen story hours, 8-year-olds who can't get tattoos or use sharp knives, can say they're trans and have life-altering surgical changes upon them, and much, much more, because it's not about making sense at this point. The converse of the NPC I support the current thing meme is the right's against the current thing meme, and Ken Wilber has a very good book at how both sides of our political spectrum have abandoned the truth. In the left would criticize the right a lot for Trump just making stuff up on the fly, and no one on the right would call him for it. And that's a fair criticism, and much of the right has been taken over by bizarre conspiracy theories, such as the election being falsified that I haven't really seen any evidence for, or saying January 6th never happened, or the left is QAnon baby eaters. Modern politics have become completely schizophrenic. The other side has to support the opposite opinion from the other side, whether or not it makes sense. The right has become anti the Ukraine war, which is a normal society all Americans would support, since it's a war against one of our great rivals, and it's the opposite of the left. Remember when the right used to be the party of America's self-interest and supporting America's allies? The right used to support the vaccine, but once it became the left's thing, it suddenly became dogma. The right still believes in the truth to a greater degree than the left, I believe, so I haven't seen the same degree of schizophrenia, especially on the center right, which hasn't spiraled off, like, further right, but the right still designs its agenda against the left rather than logically. Every issue has to be politicized, even things like COVID that you would hope to believe would have brought us together. The destruction of truth means society pushes what it wants to be true, which means as people experience the world and realize what they were taught as children were lies, it means people lose faith in the system. Young men like myself were taught growing up that men and women were exactly the same, and that if you date a girl, take everything she says at face value, treat her like a man, and flirt by just being nice. However, when you try that, and it fails, you look for something else. This is why Matrix metaphors are so popular in our culture. The Matrix is a false AI universe people believe is real, while the reality is machines are harvesting their life force. This is a pretty apt symbol for industrial civilization. We are fed lies, like that we would get permanent economic growth, no war, that toughness and masculinity are now useless, that the sexes are the same, and that the world is whatever we want it to be. That system is breaking down now. The machine that is industrial civilization fed us these lies to keep us docile, as they gradually destroyed our societies and exploited our labor. It told us everything was good and shamed those who disagreed, so we couldn't resist as a culture. This is why the red pill, or the pill that you take to see that the Matrix is a lie, is the symbol that the new right uses. People in my age group grew up in a world that told them it was a utopia, but as they grew up, they very quickly realized it was a nightmare. The elite was so unrealistic that people are going to overreact in a brutal way, feeling like they've been conned and lied to for their whole lives. One of the things that pisses me off, and my friends make fun of me for talking about this so much, is that growing up, and I'm 22, is that the pop culture in schools and all of the adults in our society told us, you can follow your dreams and get whatever you want in life as long as you push hard. That just hang in there, and if you believe in yourself and listen to your heart, everything is going to work out. And now, as I'm an adult, I see society falling apart, and I'm thinking, giving us that advice with the life that we were going to live is basically just telling us to fuck off. I keep on repeating this because people don't seem to have it sink in, but no part of the political spectrum in the sciences believes that different races, social classes, or sexes are the same genetically, and everyone agrees that genetics drives around half of personality, intelligence, and more. Our society pushes a position that's been scientifically dead for over a decade, and over time will become completely undefendable. However, when, for example, your society tells you that there are no important cultural genetic differences between races, and if you say that, will destroy you and your career, and then the science objectively returns that that's incorrect, it sets the society up for a horrifying reaction to say race, genetics, and more are the only things that matter, since the old society created no spaces to discuss them fairly, thus conceding the space to radicals. In summary, the reason people feel like NPC cogs in a video game is that they are. You are a cog in a machine that exists for the benefit of the machine that is industrial civilization. The machine lies to you and uses physical comforts to keep you docile as it tries to gain complete control over your life. You are unmoored from reality or anything your ancestors used to make their lives felt real. Does it ever give people thought the largest corporations and governments are allied with radical leftists that hate society? The reason that the ruling class is allied with those who want to destroy it is that both benefit from giving the machine power over human life. Some of you might have realized that I've drawn inspiration in this video from the Unabomber's manifesto. That's because I have. However, this brings me back to the final point. I agree with the Unabomber's manifesto's assessments of problems for modern civilization, much like Karl Marx, who correctly assessed that the capitalism of his era was oppressive. However, both err by thinking a revolution will fix everything. If we wanted to destroy the industrial world now, it wouldn't work. The military advantages conferred by industrialization mean it can't end. It's really easy to burn a building down and very difficult to build it. Revolutionaries always think that by destroying the old system, a utopia will just magically emerge from the wreckage. Instead, it degenerates to hell. As young people realize the world they grew up in was always a lie, and they get out of the Matrix, unlike the film's character, we just can't kill the machines and feel like everything's going to be fine. Dealing with these problems will require critical and realistic thinking. We now need the machine, which has been able to confer us godlike power and nearly infinite wealth. However, the machine cannot rule as it does now. The question of who will manage the machine and for what ends is the great question of our time. This feels like a strange point to tack on to the end of the video, but industrial civilization in its current form is doomed. It burns cultural institutions so quickly that the society cannot function. The birth rate is the easiest example of this, where in every industrialized society in the world, its population is destined to collapse over the next century. This crisis is horrifying, and it's unfair that our generation is expected to pay the bill for a party we never attended. However, it does provide a clean break in the 21st century to take a break so we don't lose our humanity. As of now, the machine is driving us to genetically engineering us to be cattle who can handle the dehumanization and silliness of our culture. Whether done with good or bad intentions, the creations of terrifying AI or climate change destroying our ecology. The collapse of modern industrial civilization and the birth rate are a gift from Mother Nature to keep us from driving the human race off a cliff into hell. Guys, no pressure, let's grab some popcorn and watch what might be one of the most interesting shows in history play out in front of our eyes.
In The King and many other films, archers lose arrow after arrow, as if they have a never-ending supply. But was that really the case? Didn't they run out sooner or later? In reality, each archer carried only a limited number of arrows, and a quiver could be emptied quickly. So, what happened once they were out? How did they get more arrows? In this video, we'll explore how English longbowmen were resupplied during the 100 Years' War, and how they ensured they never ran out of ammunition in the middle of battle. The Battle of Ardres in 1351 showed how disastrous it could be to run out of arrows. John de Beauchamp, the English military governor of Calais, set out on a raiding expedition with 300 men-at-arms and 300 mounted archers. when he was confronted by a much larger French force. His men initially fell back to Saint-Omer, but then entrenched themselves near Riverbend to make a stand. The French dismounted and charged the English position 3 times. Beauchamp's men repelled them again and again, until the archers ran out of arrows. Forced into close combat, with only swords and daggers, the lightly armored archers stood little chance against the third French assault on their flanks. The result was a crushing defeat for the English. Of course, longbowmen brought arrows with them into battle. Arrows were carried in sheaves or bundles of 24, usually tucked into a belt at the side or on the back. Each archer carried at least 1 bundle, and more were issued before battle, with most men going into battle with 2 or 3 sheaves, 48 to 72 arrows in total. This was a solid starting supply, but far from enough for a prolonged battle, let alone an entire campaign. A skilled archer could exhaust that stock in minutes. The exact rate of fire of longbowmen is still debated, but contemporary sources suggest that anyone shooting fewer than 10 arrows per minute was considered unfit for service. That figure can therefore be seen as a minimum, while the best archers likely shot much faster. Of course, in practice, archers seldom released arrows at their maximum rate for several minutes at a stretch. Yet in the opening storm of arrows that typically launched an English battle, consumption was enormous. And when fighting dragged on, the supply each archer carried was simply not enough, as the Battle of Ardres demonstrated. For major campaigns, the real challenge was not just resupplying archers, but ensuring that enough arrows were produced to begin with. Robert Hardy, a leading expert on the English longbow, estimates that at the Battle of Crécy, the English archers lost more than 500,000 arrows, not counting the weeks of campaigning beforehand. Manufacturing such vast quantities, not to mention transporting them to the battlefield, was a Herculean task in an age without industrial production. How medieval England managed to meet this demand is best shown by the example of Henry V. Henry V was an ambitious ruler. According to historian Juliet Barker, he had a clear goal: to secure the French throne. Soon after his coronation in 1413, the young king began planning for an expedition to France, the famous Agincourt campaign. To avoid being drawn into a war of attrition against the numerically superior French, Henry aimed to strike fast and hard. As in many English campaigns of the 100 Years' War, longbowmen were key to achieving this goal. Henry knew they would need hundreds of thousands of arrows to succeed. His grandfather Edward III's Crécy campaign had impressively demonstrated the immense strain such operations placed on supply, and the defeat at Ardres had demonstrated just how disastrous a shortage of arrows could be. Drawing on this awareness, Henry, widely regarded as an exceptionally capable administrator, began preparations as early as 1413, 2 years before the start of the campaign. Immediately after his coronation, he banned the sale of weapons and arrows to the Scots and other foreign enemies. A month later, in June of 1413, he created a new royal office and appointed the fletcher and arrow maker Nicholas Minot as keeper of the king's arrows. Stationed in the royal arsenal at the Tower of London, Minot was given a substantial budget and a dedicated staff. His responsibility was to oversee the production and purchase of arrows, and to increase stockpiles in the arsenal. Minot quickly launched large-scale production and placed orders with arrow makers across the country. In August of 1413, for example, he ordered 12,000 arrows from the London fletcher Stephen Seller, only one of many such orders. Although Henry began his preparations early, he could never have secured enough arrows without the well-organized production and supply chains already in place. Over the previous decades, the longbow had become so central to English armies that a remarkable system of mass production had developed, for both weapons and ammunition. This proto-industrial network is impressive not only for the sheer numbers of arrows it produced, but also because arrows themselves were a complex object made up of many parts. The complexity only really hits you when you try to make one yourself. Most of us wouldn't even know where to start. And in a situation where civilization suddenly took a nosedive, that could be a real problem. Which brings us to today's
You have to find,
sponsor,
like, the
the
right
book,
type of stick.
The Ultimate Guide to
And then,
Rebuilding
like,
Civilization.
Make sure it's
This
straight,
isn't your
and then get all
average
the
survival
fucking
manual.
notches
It's a
and
beautifully
branches
illustrated
off.
guide
It's like-
packed with practical knowledge. Everything from purifying water and building shelter to protecting your livestock, making soap, and even figuring out how to produce penicillin, arrows, or gunpowder from scratch. Every page features detailed hand-drawn sketches and makes it as enjoyable to browse as it is useful to read. Whether you're just curious about old-world skills or want to be ready for anything, the book is both a fascinating read and a great conversation piece. I've got a copy sitting in my living room, and it never fails to grab people's attention. You can grab yours through the link in the description and pinned comment below. It's the one book you'll be glad to have if things ever go sideways. Not all arrows were identical, but they shared certain features and requirements. A straight, knot-free wooden shaft of good quality, a delicate horn reinforcement at the nock, large goose feathers for the fletching, and specially forged steel points shaped for their intended purpose. Each of these components had its own supply chain and production challenges. For instance, arrow making required millions of goose feathers, and only the largest and strongest and the most perfectly formed ones were suitable. To meet demand, thousands upon thousands of geese had to be plucked. Most of these materials were processed by local arrow makers, hundreds all across England. In simple terms, the supply chain functioned like this. When the king needed ammunition, he issued orders to counties, where the sheriffs oversaw production and collection. Arrow makers in villages such as Bridgewater, Taunton, and Sherborne crafted arrows from local resources, bundling them into sheaves of 24. These bundles were delivered to the sheriff, who passed them on to the local lord. From there, they were gathered in the nearest large town, for example, Bristol. There, clerks inspected and counted the arrows before packing them into barrels and crates, ready for transport to the king's arsenals and directly to his armies. The counties did not always deliver the required arrows on time, and sometimes not at all. This was partly because demand fluctuated dramatically. In times of peace, it was minimal, but when war loomed, it soared. For example, when Edward III was preparing to invade France in 1359, the county sent 850,000 arrows and 20,000 bows to the Tower of London.
I don't know why I could
On
just
top
use
of
the
earlier
military as a
shipments
word
and
for it,
additional
but I don't
supplies
think
delivered directly to troops and ports. At such moments, England was almost emptied of arrows. In 1356, the year of the Battle of Poitiers, for example, the Chamberlain of Chester found it difficult to find any at all. He was informed that, quote, no arrows can be obtained from England, because the king has taken for his use all the arrows that could be found anywhere there. The only way to prepare for such shortages was to keep the arsenals well stocked at all times. From the arsenals, the arrows were transported to a port and shipped to France. There, they were prepared for distribution to key hubs. From 1347 onward, mainly in Calais, when an army took to the field, it carried a supply of arrows in its baggage train, the wagons transporting supplies, equipment, and provisions. During longer campaigns, or when operations began elsewhere, arrows were delivered directly to the army from distribution hubs, along with material and provisions. Each company of archers had its own wagon loaded with equipment and spare arrows, traveling with the troops. In addition, bowers and fletchers often traveled with the army, keeping weapons and arrows in working order along the way. In battle, the baggage train usually stayed at a safe distance behind the lines, meaning that archers had to fetch reserve arrows from the wagons, or someone had to bring them to the front.